Every year, $4.9 billion worth of potash, a fertilizer essential to global food production, quietly flows from Canada into the US, but when Trump slapped a 35% tariff on Canadian goods, Ottawa didn't shout back. They reached for something more powerful: America's food supply. Canada started quietly tightening its grip on potash exports, the lifeline of US agriculture. It's not oil, not gas, it's potassium-rich soil that feeds America. Over half of the world's food depends on fertilizers, and potash is irreplaceable. And guess who controls over 80% of America's supply? Saskatchewan, Canada. Home to the world's biggest potash reserves. In 2023, the US needed over 5 million tons of potash. It only produced 8% of that. The rest? Imported, mostly from Canada. So when Trump launched those tariffs, Canada didn't retaliate with threats. They simply discussed closing the tap. Quietly. No headline, no law, just don't send the fertilizer. The result? Prices would soar. Farm costs would spike. Food prices would explode. And there's no backup plan. Russia and Belarus. Sanction. Canada's subtle move could double the cost of lettuce in Iowa or grain in Indiana. This isn't an attack, it's leverage. And it's working. Trump hit with steel tariffs. But Canada struck at the soil. On June 12, Trump signed a 50% tariff on Canadian steel, calling it national security. No evidence, just a loud claim. Contracts collapsed across Ontario and Quebec. But Canada didn't scream. They rolled out a TRQ, tariff rate quota, one of the most quietly brutal tools in trade. It limited steel imports by country, especially those with ties to China. Canada protected its economy without touching US steel, yet. Then came the deeper move: pressure underground. Canada started rebuilding its own steel sector with a $1 billion package. Modernization, worker training, easier loans for steel towns, strategic investments. Meanwhile, they're opening escape routes from US dependence. A $40 billion LNG terminal launched its first shipment to Asia, bypassing America. A new oil pipeline is nearly complete, heading straight to the Pacific. They're preparing to walk away. No chaos, just control. Carney's rule. No emotion, only pressure. No steel tariffs. No digital services tax. Intelligence and defense ties remain untouched. But the clock is ticking. If potash exports halt, food prices surge. If oil reroutes, US refineries stall. If Chinese steel gets boxed out, US manufacturing gets squeezed. And hey, if you're following this trade chess match, hit that subscribe button right now. We break down the economic power plays you won't hear anywhere else. Canada's goal: lower the 35% tariff to 10%. Quietly. Methodically. And if Trump refuses? Corn could jump 25%. Beef and dairy up 18%. Lettuce and potatoes over 30%. Steel shortages would push truck prices higher. GM and Ford could face shutdowns. Canada isn't fighting loud. They're fighting smart. By August 1st, the North American alliance could crack for the first time in 30 years. And it all hinges on potash, something America can't replace. Trump chose metals. But Canada chose a bottleneck. If America's farms miss one growing season, the real damage begins. No sanctions. No speeches. Just silence, and the slow twist of the knife. Trump's tariffs already cost the US $8.7 billion a year. Prices up, jobs lost, chains broken. And Canada? They started hitting back, 25% on $155 billion of US goods. They're propping up aluminum, shifting exports to Asia, and locking in new trade deals. Instead of panic, they're modernizing with cleaner, greener steel. Electric arc furnaces, lower carbon, higher value. They're preparing for the future while America stumbles into the past. Even major aluminum players like Rio Tinto are getting government support. Canada's playing long-term. America's auto sector already hurting. Aluminum prices surged. Plants paused. Nissan even halted production for Canada-bound cars. Prices climbed by thousands. Supply chains cracked. And now, the defense sector's raising alarms too, shortages in critical materials. Meanwhile, Canada is looking like the stable bet for global investment. Startups, engineers, AI talent, they're going north. Toronto is booming while Washington bickers. Trump's tariffs didn't just spark a trade war, they triggered a Canadian transformation. Self-reliance, diversified trade, a stronger, cleaner economy. And now, Canada's the world's top food exporter. Ahead of the US Trump's latest move. A 40% tariff blitz on 14 countries, from Japan to South Africa. But these nations aren't backing down. They're uniting, fast. Japan called an emergency cabinet meeting. South Korea is racing to negotiate. Even South Africa is furious, calling the move unreasonable. At home, former US trade officials say the same, this will backfire. Tariffs hit consumers hardest, especially low and middle-income families. Copper futures surged 17% in a day. And that's just one material. Inflation rises, interest rates climb, recession risk grows. And while America sinks into chaos, Canada is emerging as a global anchor. Stable, predictable, and increasingly independent. The irony? Trump's tariffs might just do what decades of Canadian policy couldn't. Force Canada to break free from the US. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and drop a comment below. And subscribe to the Untold Compass for more stories they don't want you to hear.